Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we pull no punches in defending the principles that make America and Tennessee great. Before we move on to this week's topic, I hope each of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It was just my bride and I, along with my brother-in-law. Well, we also had the pack of 4 Australian Shepherds, too, because our daughter spent the holiday with her boyfriend and his family. That was a ball of fun, let me tell you. By the time this episode is released, I will be at the airport waiting to board my flight out west to spend a few weeks before the Christmas holidays with a cruise in Wyoming. The work never ends, if you know what I mean. Today, we're diving into the heart of liberty with a subtopic that's as old as human nature itself. Birds of a feather flock together. You know the saying, it's that timeless proverb reminding us that people of similar character, beliefs, or behaviors tend to stick together. But in the context of liberty, it takes on a darker shade. It explains why elected officials who are bad for our freedoms often huddle up, using the same playbook to dodge accountability, suppress truth, and maintain their grip on power. Think about it. In a free society, liberty thrives on transparency, open dialogue, and the unfiltered exchange of ideas. Our founding fathers envisioned a government of the people, by the people, for the people. One where leaders are held to account, not insulated from criticism. But when birds of a feather, those officials who prioritize control over constitutionality, flock together, they deploy identical tactics to silence dissent. They block, they obfuscate, they spin narratives, all while preaching about leadership and results. It's a pattern we've seen time and again, from local sheriffs to state representatives, from governors to state congressional delegations. It erodes the very foundations of our republic. Today, we'll unpack this through real-world examples right here in Tennessee. And once again, we'll find these examples in my county, the capital of the good old boy network. This week, I'll share personal encounters with officials like Sevier County Sheriff Michael Hodges and State Representative Fred Ashley, who have both now resorted to blocking me on social media after I dared to question their claims. We'll explore how this isn't just petty, it's a blatant lack of transparency and accountability, the antithesis of honest governance. Later in the episode, we'll zoom out through historical parallels, how tyrants throughout history have silenced critics in the public square, and why actions like those of Hodges and Ashley smack of viewpoint discrimination, recently deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in Linkey versus Freed. But before we get there, let's set the stage. Birds of a feather flock together isn't just folksy wisdom. It's a warning. When leaders surround themselves with yes men, echo chambers form, and truth gets exiled. In liberty's name, we must call it out, because if we don't, those flocks grow and our freedoms shrink. So grab your coffee, turn up the volume, and let's get into it. Liberty, leadership, and lies, because the truth will set us free. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil. All right, folks, let's roll up our sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty. Our first segment today focuses on how birds of a feather in Tennessee politics, specifically those who claim to champion law and order or conservatism, resort to the same anti-liberty tactics when faced with scrutiny. I'm talking about blocking critics on social media, a modern-day equivalent of shutting the town hall doors. This isn't about personal grudges. It's about evading transparency and accountability, two pillars essential for any government that respects liberty. So let me paint the picture with a fresh example involving Sevier County Sheriff Michael Hodges, who is still serving in that role but has an extremely viable opponent in the 2026 primary in the person of Chad Ogle. Go back to my previous couple of episodes where I talk about Mr. Ogle. Anyway, recently the sheriff posted on his campaign Facebook page, a platform that he uses to tout his leadership and connect with constituents. Here's what he wrote, and this is verbatim, quote, "Leadership isn't a catchphrase. It is doing the work and delivering results that are recognized both county and statewide. Sevier County, your leadership team at the Sevier County Sheriff's Office is grounded in facts, real performance, and proven results, not empty campaign rhetoric. Under my administration, our jails have never failed an inspection. Furthermore, I am honored to announce that the Sevier County Sheriff's Office has achieved Tier 2 accreditation from the Tennessee Corrections Institute, one of the highest recognitions a corrections division can earn in our state. Tier 2 accreditation is not handed out. It is earned through rigorous standards and accountability. Tier 2 standards require implemented inmate programs that focus on behavioral health, life skills, and education. These programs improve inmate behavior, help reduce recidivism, and support successful re-entry into the community. Our team delivered. Only 3 counties in the entire state have reached this level of excellence, and both of Sevier County's correctional facilities are among them. This accomplishment reflects the good works and improvement happening inside our 2 correctional facilities every single day. Our leadership team and correction staff are educated, experienced, well-trained, and dedicated professionals. They are truly some of the finest public servants in Tennessee. As your sheriff and as an agency, we stay focused on our work, not on empty promises and political noise. Our results speak for themselves. I hope you all have a wonderful and safe weekend in the most beautiful place on earth." Unquote. Sounds impressive, right? All about facts, performances, and steering clear of political noise. But as someone who's been watching local leadership closely, I couldn't let it slide without context. I commented with 3 verifiable instances of what I and many others in the county see as failed leadership under his watch. First, the mishandling of an assault case where deputies reportedly failed to arrest an abuser who confessed and had evidence against him, including wielding a knife. That puts the community safety at risk. Second, there was a lawsuit filed by a former inmate against Hodges and dozens of others over alleged mistreatment in the Sevier County Jail, which directly contradicts the rosy picture of flawless inspections and high standards. Third, controversial statements on immigration, where Hodges suggested that targeting all illegal immigrants would shut down the local economy, which critics argue shows a lack of commitment to enforcing laws uniformly and protecting citizens, as well as favoring businesses that employ illegal immigrants over the legal citizens in our county. Many of those same businesses that benefit greatly from exploiting these illegal immigrants would also likely be campaign contributors or close friends and associates of the people in power in this county, like the sheriff. Add to those examples are his actions as the chairman of the Sevier County Republican Party, violating bylaws during the primary, rigging the biannual reorganization to favor his reelection, and his chosen slate of other officers. You have to go back to an episode from earlier this year where I detail all of those shenanigans. So these weren't baseless attacks. They were grounded in public records and reports, the very things he claims to value. So what happened next? Instead of engaging, debating, or even ignoring the comment like a leader secure in their record would, the sheriff's campaign page blocked me. Poof, gone from the conversation. No chance to follow up, no public rebuttal. Just silence. This is the same tactic employed by another local bird in the flock, State Representative Fred Ashley, who continues to represent Sevier County's District 12 in the Tennessee House, after I called out outright lies in his campaign materials, claiming to be a true conservative while supporting policies that were not conservative in nature, drawing criticism for corrupt tactics and being part of a tush push to ram through legislation some see as anti-conservative, he blocked me too. That's been over a year now. No discussion, no defense, just a digital door slam. Now, why does this matter for liberty? Transparency isn't optional in a free society. It is the oxygen that keeps corruption from suffocating us. When elected officials use public-facing platforms to broadcast their achievements, but block critics who point out inconsistencies, they're cherry-picking the narrative. It's like a one-way mirror. They see out, but we can't see in. Accountability demands that leaders face tough questions, especially from constituents. Fred still hasn't held a town hall, but he will show up at Sheriff Hodges' campaign events. Check this picture out. Blocking someone for highlighting verifiable issues isn't leadership. It's cowardice. It creates an echo chamber where only praise echoes and truth gets muffled. Think about it. In Sevier County, the sheriff's office handles law enforcement, jails, and public safety, areas where trust is paramount. If the sheriff can't handle a Facebook comment, how can we trust him with the weightier matters of justice? Same for Ashley in the State House. If he's dodging calls of hypocrisy and conservatism, what does that say about his votes on our behalf? These actions breed distrust, erode public confidence, and set a precedent for other officials to follow suit. Birds of a feather indeed. They flock to the same evasion tactics because it protects their power, not our liberties. This isn't isolated. It's a pattern in Tennessee and beyond. When officials prioritize self-preservation over open dialogue, they undermine the First Amendment spirit. We'll connect this to broader historical and legal context in the next segment, but for now, remember, true leaders welcome scrutiny because iron sharpens iron. These folks, they're flocking away from the forge. We're going to take a quick break and come back on the other side with some of the reasons why these bad birds flock together. I'll be right back. All right, folks, welcome back. Moving on now beyond Sevier County, we're going to broaden the lens to the bigger picture of how viewpoint discrimination plays out, not just locally, but nationally and even internationally. Again, folks, the old saying, birds of a feather flock together, is not just some folksy wisdom. It is a timeless truth that has echoed through the annals of history whenever power-hungry leaders band together to silence opposition and consolidate their grip on authority. Tyrants, dictators, authoritarian regimes, and the good old boy networks have always sought to control the public square, muting critics and dissenting voices to preserve their fragile regimes and perpetuate their narratives. Today, we will draw to those stark parallels and demonstrate how the blocking tactics employed by Sheriff Hodges and Representative Ashley are not merely rude or petty. They are blatant viewpoint discrimination, which has been, again, ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in the pivotal 2024 decision Linkey versus Freed. We'll also expand our discussion to include contemporary examples from the Biden administration, the European Union, and the ongoing crackdowns in the United Kingdom, showing how these entities are flocking together in a modern assault on free speech. First, we're going to dive deeper into a quick history lesson to set the stage. Throughout time, despots and authoritarian figures have wielded censorship as their weapon of choice, often with brutal efficiency. Take ancient Rome, for instance. Emperor Nero, infamous for his vanity and paranoia, didn't just silence critics, he executed them outright. The philosopher Seneca, once one of his principal advisors, was forced to commit suicide for daring to question Nero's tyrannical rule and excesses. This wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern where emperors like Nero surrounded themselves with sycophants and enforcers to eliminate any voice that could undermine their divine-like status. Fast forward to the 20th century, and we see even more systematic oppression. Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union purged millions through sham show trials, forced labor in the gulags, and outright executions, silencing anyone who whispered even the slightest dissent against his communist regime. His birds of a feather were the dreaded secret police, the NKVD, who enforced an iron curtain of fear, monitoring every conversation and rooting out perceived enemies of the state. Similarly, Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany jailed journalists and shut down opposition presses to control the national narrative and propagate his ideology of racial supremacy. Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution in China, well, this took it to another level, mobilizing fanatical Red Guards to re-educate or eliminate intellectuals, teachers, and anyone who challenged the Communist Party line, resulting in widespread chaos, persecution, and the deaths of millions. Closer to home, even in America's own past, we've seen troubling echoes of this suppression. During the Red Scare of the 50s, McCarthyism led to the blacklisting of Hollywood figures for alleged communist ties. Well, accusations that in many cases turned out to have merit, but it still stifled free speech and ruined careers without due process. Or consider the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, enacted under President John Adams, which criminalized any false, scandalous, and malicious criticism of the federal government. These laws were used to imprison newspaper editors and political opponents, highlighting just how fragile liberty can be when those in power prioritize self-preservation over principles. Though rightly repealed or allowed to expire, these acts, they served as a cautionary tale. These tyrants from ancient times to modern history did not or could not engage in fair debate, so they destroyed or silenced their opposition. They flocked with like-minded enforcers, secret police, propaganda machines, and loyalists, or other members of the good old boy network to monopolize the public square, ensuring only approved voices were heard and amplified. Why this relentless pursuit, you may ask? Well, as we discussed last week, with lies being the tools of the enemy, truth is the tyrant's greatest adversary. Open discourse exposes falsehoods, shines a light on corruption, and demands accountability that can topple thrones and dismantle empires or destroy good old boy networks. Now let's fast forward to today, where social media has become the modern public square, a vast digital agora where ideas clash, information spreads like wildfire, and leaders engage directly with the public. But this new frontier hasn't eliminated the old tactics. It's amplified them. When public officials like Sheriff Hodges or Representative Ashley block critics on platforms they use for official announcements, such as their Facebook pages that tout their achievements and policy wins, it's not a personal spat as some would see it. It is discriminatory censorship. They are selectively silencing viewpoints that challenge their self-proclaimed facts and results, creating a curated echo chamber that is ultimately funded by taxpayer trust in public office. This isn't just an annoyance. It's a direct threat to the principles of free speech that underpin our republic. This brings us once again to the landmark Supreme Court case, Limke versus Freed, decided unanimously, even with the three liberals on the court, on March 15th, 2024. In this ruling, the court provided much needed clarity on when a public official's social media blocking constitutes a violation of the First Amendment. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, not a huge fan of her right now, but writing for the court, she emphasized that if an official uses their account to exercise authority, such as posting about government actions, policies, achievements, or even soliciting public input, it transforms into state action. At that point, blocking users based on their viewpoint becomes unconstitutional censorship, as it discriminates against specific perspectives in the forum that's effectively public. The key test laid out: does the official possess actual authority over the topic at hand, and do they purport to exercise it on the page? If the answer is yes, they cannot block critics without infringing on free speech rights. Applying this directly to our local examples, I commented on Sheriff Hodges' post that was squarely about his administration's jail accreditations, clearly official business tied to his role as sheriff. Ashley's Facebook page aggressively pushes his legislative record and accomplishments in office. By blocking me for countering their narratives with verifiable facts and alternative viewpoints, they are discriminating against my perspective, much like a tyrant shutting down opposition newspapers or broadcasters. The Supreme Court made it abundantly clear. Officials cannot wield government power to mute dissent in these digital forums. This decision was a resounding victory for liberty, reaffirming that the public square, whether physical or virtual, must remain open to all voices, not just those that flatter the powerful. But let's not stop at the local level. This issue is national and global, with birds of a feather flocking together across borders to enforce viewpoint discrimination. Take the Biden administration, for instance. Under President Biden, federal agencies have been accused of pressuring social media companies to censor content that is deemed misinformation or disinformation, particularly around the COVID-19 policies, elections, and conservative viewpoints. A federal judge in 2023 issued an injunction limiting the administration's contact with platforms like Facebook and Twitter, now X, ruling that such actions amounted to viewpoint discrimination of political speech by suppressing conservative ideas. This was part of the broader Missouri versus Biden case, where evidence showed government officials coercing platforms to remove or shadow ban posts critical of administration policies, effectively creating a backdoor censorship regime. Critics argued that this collaboration between government and big tech echoes historical suppressions, where the state outsources censorship to private entities to skirt First Amendment protections. Now let's shift our gaze across the Atlantic. The European Union has institutionalized similar controls through something called the Digital Services Act, or DSA, which went into full effect in 2024. The DSA mandates that online platforms combat disinformation, hate speech, and illegal content with hefty fines for non-compliance, up to 6% of global revenue. That right there proves another one of my axioms perfectly. Once again, there is nothing on this planet so well designed to rob us of our money, our sweat equity, than a government we apathetically let get elected. Much like Uncle Sucker and his 50 greedy nephews have found ways to increase their reach into our wallets, the EU is using the DSA to reach into the wallets of social media companies worldwide. While it's framed as protecting users, it has raised alarms about viewpoint discrimination, as platforms are now deputized to enforce EU standards that could suppress dissenting opinions on topics like immigration, climate policy, or gender issues. U.S. observers, including the House Judiciary Committee, have warned that the DSA poses a global censorship threat, potentially forcing American companies to apply EU rules worldwide and chill free speech beyond Europe's borders. This Brussels effect means that what starts as EU regulation could ripple into de facto global standards, where platforms err on the side of over-censorship to avoid penalties. And then there is the United Kingdom, where the situation has escalated dramatically in recent years, particularly following the 2024 riots sparked by information around a stabbing incident in Southport. Under their Online Safety Act and existing laws, UK authorities have arrested hundreds for social media posts deemed to incite violence, spread hate, or stir up racial tensions during the unrest. For example, individuals like Tyler Kay and Jordan Parler were jailed for posts that encouraged violence, even if they didn't participate in the riots themselves. Reports indicate that police are making around 30 arrests per day for quote-unquote offensive online speech, with over 12,000 such arrests annually under pre-social media era laws now applied to digital expression. This crackdown has sparked debates about free speech versus public order, but critics see it correctly as viewpoint discrimination, disproportionately targeting right-leaning or anti-immigration sentiments while creating a chilling effect on public discourse. Now, back home here in Sevier County, where the good old boys have controlled all levers of government for decades with Hodges and Ashley as members in good standing with him, well, they are flocking with the wrong crowd, emulating these historical suppressors and modern authoritarians rather than upholding oaths as constitutional guardians. This is not about protecting personal privacy. It's about evading scrutiny and accountability. If a public official can't handle the online heat, which is the robust debate that comes with the territory, they shouldn't seek or hold public office. Liberty demands better from those we entrust with power. It demands resilience in the face of criticism, not the cowardice of the block button or coerced censorship. So as we wrap up here, folks, ask yourselves this. Are we letting these birds flock unchecked, allowing viewpoint discrimination to erode our freedoms bit by bit? Or will we demand the transparency and open discourse our founders fought so hard to secure? Will we stand idly by as governments from Washington to Brussels to London to Nashville to Sevierville tighten their grip on the digital public square? Stick with me through this upcoming break, and I'll come back with my closing thoughts and this week's wisdom from God's Word. I'll be right back. All right, folks, now we'll wrap up this week's episode. As I mentioned in the opening, I'll be spending the next few weeks up in Wyoming. Here's hoping that the extremely cold weather doesn't settle in while I'm there and that my flight home will be without any delays or cancellations. I will have a couple of guests for the next couple of episodes that I think you will find very interesting. The first one will be Dr. Nelva Lee. Her background lines up closely with the core topics of this podcast. Dr. Lee was appointed by Governor Kemp to the Georgia Department of Community Health, where she brought a firsthand view of how bureaucracy and leadership can either protect or undermine the citizen's liberty. She is the founder and CEO of a medical interpreting trade school and has built an organization that put community empowerment at the forefront. She was also a candidate for Georgia Superintendent of Schools and can speak to how entrenched interests shape education policy. Following Dr. Lee, the next guest will be Professor Mark Deffant from the University of South Florida. He recently published a peer-reviewed paper in Sexuality and Culture titled Evolutionary Psychology and the Crisis of Empirical Rigor in Feminist Studies. Now, his paper argues that much of modern feminist scholarship has drifted from empirical science into ideology, rejecting biological and psychological evidence that explains sex differences in behavior, preferences, and outcomes. He draws upon research in evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and behavior biology. His paper examines topics such as the mythological gender pay gap, patriarchy, and SA theory through an evidence-based lens. He will discuss how the data tells a very different story from what is usually taught in feminist studies on campuses or in the woke media. That is what we deal with here on this podcast: facts, data, and logic versus feelings and fiction. So now, this week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verse 2. You shall not follow the crowd in wrongdoing. When testifying in a lawsuit, you shall not follow the crowd in perverting justice. It appears that these two are following the wrong crowd. The crowd that consists of silencing free speech and viewpoint discrimination. History is littered with those types of people, folks, and they are never on the good side. I would like to urge my listeners to contact the sheriff's office and contact Representative Ashley and ask them for the justification for silencing critics on social media and for refusing to engage in the honest dialogue that is crucial to the proper functioning of our type of government. You can search their profiles on the web or social media and reach out to them. Dollars to donuts, though. I can almost guarantee you that you will not get an answer. Heck, you might even get blocked. We could start a class action lawsuit together, right? Anyway, I would be interested in learning about the results of your efforts. Let me know how they go by sending an email to Larry@libertyleadershipandlies.com. Again, that is Larry@libertyleadershipandlies.com. Thanks for leaning in this week. Please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen or watch. And you can join me on X. My handles are at LarryForTN12 or at Lies Liberty. You can also visit libertyleadershipandlies.com for more. And let's keep standing in the arena for liberty, leadership, and truth. God bless you. God bless Tennessee. And God bless these United States of America. Until next week, reveille. It's time to wake up.